I feel like the story of the Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, if we're being very proper, is even more tragic than that of the passenger pigeon. I mean, the passenger pigeon was being killed for a use. It was being killed off to feed people. There was a lot of kind of unnecessary avarice in what was going on, but it was a harvested food source. Whereas, I know that the thylacine was kind of wrongfully accused of killing sheep.
Yeah.
And then, made an enemy of the government and bounties put on it. I mean, it was just systematically hunted down to exterminate. Like, the goal was to get rid of it. And
I mean, there was still a price on its head when there were only a handful left.
Yeah, I mean, and the saddest part is the fact that the Tasmanian government protected the thylacine the year it went extinct.
I heard it was so bad that when I think it was Benjamin was the last one that was killed, they just threw its body on the trash.
Oh yeah, well, Benjamin's death was actually complete neglect, and Benjamin wasn't even a boy; it was a girl.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Benjamin was a female, and she was the last thylacine anyone knew of. And yeah, the keeper actually just didn't open up the door at night to her sleeping quarters, and she died of hypothermia. Because she, it was absolute neglect, and so the story of the Tasmanian tiger is immensely sad, and it's an animal that Tasmania is in this amazing position. A quarter of Tasmania's land is protected. That doesn't exist anywhere in the world, like that level of protected land. And
what percentage of the land is completely wild?
Basically all of that protected land is wild. So like 25% of Tasmania is wilderness. Yeah, you can drive through it and hike through it and everything. That doesn't change it from being wilderness.
No, I mean in addition to that 25%, how much do you know?
Oh, I don't know how much extra. I don't know how much is privately owned or whatnot. But Tasmania's is actually in really great shape to possibly bring back something like the Tasmanian tiger. I know I am actually friends with the man who sequenced its genome a couple of years ago.
Okay, so they have that.
They have that, yeah. But no one has ever really done the type of advanced reproductive technologies with marsupials that would be needed. I think they would actually be easier in marsupials than in placentals.
Why is that?
Well, the amazing thing about cloning is you get oocytes from a mother, you make the embryo, then you implant them. In marsupials, well, what I should say is, like, let's say we wanted to clone a giant, and we'll use cloning as an example, but even though we're talking about de-extinction, let's say that a giant rat goes extinct, but somebody preserved its cells. And you implant the embryo into a surrogate mother from a smaller species, and she just can't carry it to term because the embryo grows too big, right? I mean, so size is an issue. The Tasmanian tiger is much larger than every other living predatory marsupial. But all marsupials are born super teeny tiny.
I see. So you can use the closest
relative. And then
relative.
They go to a pouch. And once they've grown in the pouch so far, I mean, you can actually raise a marsupial in an artificial pouch. People save, like roadkill koalas and kangaroos, right? They check the pouch, put the baby into a pouch, they just bottle feed it through a hole, and they grow up. So, I mean, I think you could use a numbat, which is the closest living relative, to produce embryos of thylacines, and you could use the pouch. That's the other thing, you can also swap pouches, right? People have done that. They've taken embryos developing in one pouch of one species and swap them to another in kangaroos and other macropods. So you could take it and then put it in a larger animal's pouch to get it to grow big enough, or just raise it in an artificial pouch. But the thing is it will take a lot. I mean, Tasmanian tiger is probably one of those species where we're a little ways away from dreaming about yet, because you look at a numbat or a Tasmanian devil, and there's so many differences between them and a thylacine. You have to basically morph their entire bodies into a coyote-like animal. And, if you were dealing with a Tasmanian devil, you'd have to be changing its behavior to turn it into a predator. Dealing with a numbat, in either case, you're dealing with animals that you have to turn into pack animals. So there's a whole host of behavioral, physiological, and morphological changes to make.
But then maybe you just need to use multiple species. I mean, maybe you take some characteristics
just like the dodo bird, right? I mean, yeah, you would need to, maybe use the cells of the numbat, use a Tasmanian devil as a surrogate, and then and really it comes down to the scaling of gene editing. Is once we get to the ability to really make lots of changes, we can probably, like I said, it's not impossible. It's going to be more challenging. But in the long run, it's going to become something that's easier to do. And I think Australia could definitely recreate the thylacine and repopulate it.
But do we have with the passenger pigeon, you have 1,500 museum samples. Do we have anything close to that with the Tasmanian tiger?
Well, technically, you only need one good sample to recreate an extinct species. Helps to have more than one. And in some cases, you do need at least one male and one female. But you just need really a handful of them. And there are actually many specimens of thylacine. There's, I don't know if there's more than 100, but there's definitely several dozen skins. There's a lot of bones you can get material from. And there are a few preserved in alcohol, which is where some of the first DNA fragments came from. And I should actually say that people were sequencing thylacine DNA in little bits back in the late 1990s. And that was actually the work that inspired me to think that de-extinction would be possible someday. The thylacine was the reason I can rattle off its story and talk about it a lot is it was one of my very early passions as well. That it was the thylacine was my gateway extinct species to learning about all the species that human beings have killed off. And thinking about how we could try and bring them back. And so my passion for passenger pigeons, actually, and dodos and other birds, is all in thanks to being inspired by the thylacine.